Dr. Brown, thanks so much for coming. Thanks for letting me interview you.
Glad to be here.
I was wondering if you would just start by telling us a little bit about who you are and your story, about how you became a Christian.
Yeah, so I'm a Jewish follower of Jesus, born in New York City, raised on Long Island. My dad was the senior lawyer in the New York Supreme Court. My mom and dad very happily married, but we weren't a religious Jewish family. So I was bar mitzvahed at 13, but it was more of a social event than a spiritual event for me. To give you a picture of it, I had to chant a portion of the Hebrew Bible as part of the ceremony for the bar mitzvah. I don't even know what I was chanting. I learned the words, but didn't know what they meant. The big event that impacted me when I was 13 was seeing Jimi Hendrix in concert. And I'd been playing drums since I was 8 years old, and the whole rock scene, you know, I turned 8 in 63. 64, the Beatles came to America, so just give you a context. So now 13 years old, seeing Hendrix, that whole thing really appealed to me. When I was 14, I started getting high, and I had a high capacity for drugs, so very quickly I went to harder drugs. And by the time I was 15, I was shooting heroin and just complete rebel. And my two best friends, 16 years old now, we were playing in a band together. Two of them liked these two girls that were worldly like them, but their dad had been praying for them for years. Their uncle was a pastor, and God started to draw them in, so they started attending church services. And then my friends went to hang out with the girls. And the church was teaching a lot at that time out of the book of Revelation and end time prophecy and stuff. So, you know, you drug users and the Revelation, that's kind of interesting. And so they'd come back and talk to me about it. And this really neat church and stuff. And they were Pentecostal, so they believed in praying for the sick and things. So that was interesting to my friends. And I didn't think anything of it. But little by little, the Holy Spirit started to really draw them in and convict them of sin. And they started to change. So I thought, I've got to go and pull them out. That was August of 71. I'm just going to show them this whole thing is a sham and all this. And the folks were mainly older in the congregation, small church. When they met me, though, they immediately started praying for me. And they were so nice to me, I thought, all right, you do what you're doing, I'll do what I'm doing. But their prayers were answered by God. And I didn't know anyone was praying for me. And I was not just a sinner, I was a proud sinner. I think it was John Bunyan who said, first we practice sin, then we defend it, then we boast about it. I was in the boast about it stage. And suddenly I started feeling miserable about the things I was doing. Stealing money from my own father, lying to my friends, just the abusive life I was living. And by the end of the year, I knew that Jesus died for my sins and rose from the dead. I knew it was real, but I wasn't willing to surrender because I knew I couldn't live the way I was living. But by December 17th of 71, I just encountered the love of God so deeply. And I realized that the sinful life I was living, right then I said, God, I'll never put a needle in my arm again. And then 2 days after that, just quit getting high and was pretty much instantly transformed. And my dad said, okay, Michael, when he saw it was real, he said, okay, I'm glad you're off drugs, but we're Jews. We don't believe in this. So he brought me to meet the local rabbi, fresh out of Jewish Theological Seminary, brilliant man, took a real interest in me. Would meet with me regularly. We'd have these different debates. And then he'd say, listen, how can you tell us what to believe? You don't even know Hebrew. I've been studying it all my life. And I learned it from my father, his father going back. And he'd bring me to meet other rabbis. So that began to challenge me, even though I had memorized thousands of verses. I used to memorize 20 verses a day and was just in the Word day and night and praying day and night and zealous. I couldn't answer a lot of their questions and objections. And I said, God, I just want truth. I'm going to pursue you and your truth. I want to be a faithful, loyal Jew, whatever that means, because I knew that part was biblical and true, and we disagreed on the rest. And it was through that I ended up majoring in Hebrew in college and then getting a doctorate in Semitic languages from New York University. But the journey that got me started was wanting to be able to answer with integrity. I knew the Lord had changed my life. I couldn't deny that. But when people come with deep, penetrating questions, and you don't have an intellectual answer, that's difficult because we're not supposed to love God with our heart and not our mind, right? And we can't necessarily figure everything out. But if we really earnestly seek God, I believe He'll give us solid answers and lead us into the truth. So all these years, I've been active in Jewish ministry to this day, writing, reaching out, doing debates. And then my heart's always burned for revival, for people to really know and encounter the Lord. And then as I learned more, understood revival in church history. So that's always been a great burden to see a fresh awakening in our generation. And then with that, to see the gospel go to the nations. So these are things that have burned in me for many, many years and just are part of the different ministry work that we do to this day.
That's wonderful. Now, I know that you write and speak and talk and have a YouTube channel where you answer a lot of questions about a wide variety of different cultural issues. What do you think are the most central to understand and as Christians to be able to respond to?
That's a big question. So if we're talking about the questions the world is asking, there's a fundamental rejection of many things that were kind of presupposed in previous generations. My friend Professor Darrell Bock says, we used to be able to say it's true because it's in the Bible. Now we have to say it's in the Bible because it's true. So just the notion of a God that has authority, that has the right to assert himself, as opposed to this being some Bronze Age antique that we're trying to carry over into our day. The idea of a God of justice, a God with standards, that's very foreign to people. So having people understand that we're in a world created by God and his ways are good and his ways are best, to get people back to that. So there's a consciousness of God and a realization of our need for him. That's a major, major issue. Obviously, everything having to do with LGBTQ and on, that is massive. And what we have to realize is that a lot of young people really, they have a heart for justice. They want to stand with the underdog. So from their perception, Billy's a really nice kid. Some of the other boys pick on him. Billy likes Bobby. They're both really nice. Why can't they be together? And there's no larger understanding of the purpose of marriage or family or things like that. So again, a lot of stuff that would have been presupposed, we have to kind of start from scratch there. And the moment we take certain stands, we're excluded as bigots, homophobes, etc. And obviously the battle for life, the lines are being drawn more clearly than ever in terms of not just a woman saying, okay, we don't like the idea of abortion, but it's necessary, going from that to shouting your abortion and scratching on the Supreme Court doors during the Kavanaugh hearings. Just the recent rally where Chuck Schumer delivered those ominous comments that he subsequently regretted saying. But that same rally, they're like cheering, hey, who had an abortion? Come on, let's shout it out. It's a very sad thing to witness.
There's no more safe, legal, and rare.
No, that's antique now. The motto of Bill Clinton and the old Democrat Party, there have been drastic shifts. And then on the cultural end, why do we have the nuns, N-O-N-E-S? Why are so many younger people dropping out of religion? They don't want to identify as religion. What are some of the causes for it? And some of it does tie in with the new atheism and their arguments getting out. Some of it ties in with the perception that the church is hateful and bigoted. Some of it ties in with hypocrisy and scandals in the church. But the positive is there's a generation to reach that has not encountered the goodness of the Lord. So it's a great harvest field, but we've got to take it very seriously.
So one of the things that you talked about was with the LGBTQ issue, people want to be compassionate for their friends. They want to be nice to their friends. How is it that the culture has misunderstood compassion? What's Christian compassion?
Right. Well, one problem is that the voices of the church that the media amplifies are the Fred Phelps of the world, the God hates fags type people, the extremist preacher who's also a racist. So there's a caricature of what we believe. So the moment we raise our voice, we're already put in that camp. And then if you have compassion minus God, you're not going to think of what's really in the best long-term interest of an individual. So for me, if I'm dealing with a situation with a child who identifies, a boy who identifies as girl, I'm thinking, okay, compassion is to work with that child to help them be whole from the inside out and not let them have hormone blockers and not let them go through radical surgery and castration and not let them be on hormones for life. That's the compassionate thing. So we have to present it in such a way that if you cut us, we bleed love. And a lot of it will not be overcome in the public setting because it's already too caricatured. It's going to have to be overcome one-on-one. It's going to have to be overcome relationally, where you sit with people and spend time with people, and they realize, hey, you're actually a nice person, because I thought you were this, this, and this. So a lot of this is going to have to be done relationally, where we demonstrate our love.
So how does that happen specifically? Would you mind just being a little bit more specific about that?
Yeah. Be a friend. Take an interest in people's lives. Get involved. Ask them to share their stories with you, and let them know that you care. And I've sat with people and done this myself, So if I'm on all the hit lists as this terrible homophobic, transphobic bigot, etc. So, the hate list, etc. So I'm caricatured a certain way, right? When I've sat with people, long flights or just made appointments to meet with local activists and sat and talked, they've heard my heart and they've recognized that I was of a different character. And it was just getting involved. And the first thing I'll always do is ask them, tell me your story. And I'll tell them, this is what I believe. This is who I am. I really want to understand who you are. So I tell them up front, there's no deception there. And most people want you to hear their story. And when you do, you can realize how they view us, how they view our beliefs, what it sounds like in their ears. And then if you just make clear, hey, I'm here and I'm your friend. And we obviously differ and you understand our differences, but I want to take a genuine interest in your life. And you just do that practically. So for example, if it's a neighbor, that you be the best neighbor you can be. They move in and you realize it's a lesbian couple that just moves in. If your custom is to bring them cookies, you bring them cookies. And hey, if you ever need anything, we're here. Why? Because they're human beings for whom Jesus died. And they're not necessarily activists marching down the streets or trying to indoctrinate your kids. In their mind, they're trying to live their lives. So we demonstrate genuine Christian love. We pray. And when the door is open, that's when we walk through. When we're invited through, that's when we do. And we know human beings are going to have needs, are going to have issues, going to have problems. We reach out. If it's social media and you see people being treated a certain way, say, hey, I'm a follower of Jesus and I don't like the way you were treated. I don't agree with this, but you make it known. You get outside your comfort zone there. And there are many opportunities we can have. I was in Ohio ministering, and I was asked to speak on Can You Be Gay and Christian? And afterwards, a couple came up to me and they're crying, and our daughter came out and told us she's gay, 16 years old. I said, well, where is she? They go, well, she's at her aunt's house. And I said, why? They said, well, we kicked her out. I said, you did what? They said, well, we kicked her out. We didn't know what to do. And they're crying. And I said, look, when she comes out and tells you she's lesbian, she's gay, that's the only language she knows. You know how hard that was for her to do that? And she's not trying to be an activist or marching in the house with her girlfriend. She's being honest with you. I said, you need to get that girl back in your house and you sit her down and say, look, you know what we believe. That's not changing, but you're our daughter. We love you. We want to be involved in your life. We know how difficult it was to share this. And so that's what we have to do. Genuine love. And I've gotten many a call on my radio show or met people who've told me that it was the persistent love of a mother or a father or a sibling that just kept loving them and praying for them and being for them. And that's how they're with the Lord today.
Am I understanding you right that you've got to wed both clarity about what it is that you believe and what it is that the Bible teaches with a profound care for that person and love for that person?
Right. In other words, be a follower of Jesus, right? So how can you be a follower of Jesus if you're not committed to truth? How can you be a follower of Jesus if you're not committed to love? But here's the thing. If someone understands that we are conservative Christians in our beliefs or Bible believers or something like that, or they see us going to church or they see us with a Bible, one short sentence is more than enough for them to understand where you're coming from. Like I told these parents, you don't need to tell your daughter every day. You don't need to leave Bible verses on her pillow. She knows. She lives under the weight of knowing what you believe. So I was flying to Italy once, and about an 8-9 hour flight. And I was really looking forward to resting and just kind of doing my own thing, reading, maybe finding some clean movie and just chilling. And the guy next to me, immediately, out and proud, I'm going to meet my partner in Italy, flight attendant, but I got a day off here, so I'm flying over to meet my partner, and he and I thought, all right, you're out and proud, I'm out and proud. So I told him, I'm a follower of Jesus in ministry, believe the Bible, and, I just told him very plainly, and I said, just tell me about your life, tell me your story. So that's all he needed to hear from me. And then, the rest of the time we talked at the end of the flight, getting off the plane, I said to him, let me ask you a question. If you met someone who held to my beliefs about marriage and homosexuality, etc., would you consider that person a bigot? He said, absolutely. I said, you consider me a bigot? He said, no, I heard your heart. I love to meet a conservative with a heart. So you don't need to announce it or go into a long sermon. You could say, I'm a conservative follower of Jesus. I believe the Bible's clear about God made men to be with women and women to be with men. That's my beliefs. But please, I want to know more about you. Tell me your story. they know. Now they know. You don't have to insert a Bible verse every time. It may be, there may be a time when you preach hard, just like you would to anyone else. But when you start witnessing to someone, you're not witnessing, I'm witnessing to a drunkard, I'm witnessing to an atheist, I'm witnessing to a gay couple, I'm listening to people who need Jesus. And these issues may come up, they may not come up. At some point they'll come up, but they don't have to come up in the initial interaction in terms of going back and forth, especially if you want to build relationship. And it was very interesting talking to this flight attendant as we were flying to Italy. He shared what happened. He had gotten AIDS, somehow still alive and healthy, but he was one of the early AIDS activists and talking about what he was doing in New York City and so on and the causes he was fighting for. And then when he was going to go off with his partner, his parents were going to a Lutheran church and they met with the Lutheran pastor, and the pastor wrote him a letter. And he told me what was in the contents of the letter, and I thought, that guy nailed it. It was beautiful. It was excellent. It was just the way I would want to say it. And when he finished relating it, he said, so much hate. Where did he get so much hate from? So you realize it's kind of like someone with a really bad sunburn. And you say, hey man, how you doing? You pat them on the back and they jump. You didn't hit them hard, but there's extreme sensitivity. So with everything he's been through, with rejection and everything, and even though there's much more public acceptance of homosexuality today, still there's a lot of rejection people deal with. So right off the bat, the defenses are up. And that's why one sentence about what we believe is more than enough, and then demonstrate real love, and then as the door opens, you can go further, taking the gospel to them.
So is it different if you encounter like an activist from somebody that is engaging in same-sex practice, right? Like, is there a difference in how you would approach those sorts of things?
Yeah, but just like anyone else. In other words, if I was dealing with someone that was a Catholic and attending a Catholic church, and I'm not Catholic, and we're dialoguing about things, and I'm sharing my perspective of the gospel with them, that's one thing. If my neighbor was campaigning for Latin masses only, and everyone that claimed to be a Christian that wasn't going to Latin mass should be strung up, I mean, some extreme thing. Yeah. Well, it's going to be a different approach. When God called me into these areas in 2004, I was tremendously burdened about the activism, what I saw in my home community where we had just moved, and what was happening in the schools and in the place of business and gay pride events in the park and things like that. I was tremendously burdened about the activism. But I knew that in order to have God's perspective, I needed to have a heart for the people as well, because this was never part of my own burden. I don't come out of homosexuality. This was never part of my own story. So as I really prayed about this, what the Lord laid on my heart was reach out and resist. Reach out to the people with compassion, resist the agenda with courage. So we need hearts of compassion with backbones of steel. So 99% of what I write about or speak about addressing LGBT issues has to do with the activism, has to do with the indoctrination of children, has to do with what's being pushed through the media, has to do with laws that are being passed and attacks on religious liberty and things like that. That's why we're addressing it. If it was just your neighbors next door or a homosexual couple, right, you pray for them to know the Lord and seek to reach out to them. But that's not so much of a concern because it's not something that is aggressively seeking to change your world and your rights and things like that. So when it comes to the activism, I'm still going to do my best to befriend the person. And I've done that with gay activists. I'm still going to do my best to reach out as a human being to a human being and get past some of the caricaturing and demonizing. But I will absolutely stand against the activism. I'll tell them, listen, if anyone tries to hurt you, they're going to have to get past me. But I just want you to know I'm opposing what you stand for.
Yeah. So one of the things that you just mentioned was the indoctrination of children. Are you specifically talking about public school education?
Public school, from drag queens reading to toddlers in our libraries with the sanction of the American Library Association, to children's cartoons, from the public schools to social media, from every way that you can reach children through toys being designed, certain ways and things like that. Everything that's going to try to impact children about gender identity, about sexuality, absolutely. It's coming from many, many different angles.
So how does a parent raise a child in today's culture to have a Christian approach to marriage and human sexuality.
Yeah, so we can't just take for granted that they're going to get it by osmosis or that they're going to get it from the environment around them. To the contrary, we have to see ourselves as the church has often been in a hostile culture where the mainstream views are very contrary to ours. You know, the early church, the Christians were called atheists because they didn't worship the other gods. So, you know, the famous Polycarp line, away with the atheists, you're the atheist.
Yes.
So there has to be tremendous intentionality out of the womb to model mommies and daddies. And again, we recognize that not everyone fits into an exact stereotypical attitude in terms of gender expression, but we want to highlight and celebrate men being men and women being women. We want to celebrate the beauty of marriage and the meaning of it. And listen, we as parents, if we'll spend adequate time with our kids, we have the real power to indoctrinate them with holy and good and life-giving things. And then from day one, you have an environment where they can talk, where they can ask questions. If you have your kids in the public school, you need to be like a hawk. You, at the risk of being obnoxious, you need to be checking on the curriculum and finding out what's happening and interacting regularly with your kids and looking at the assignments, because you don't know what's going to be coming their way. And they may not know that they're being indoctrinated because they're too young to realize it. If you have the ability to put them in a Christian school, if that works better, at a home school, and then to have circles of friends that they can be with that are encouraging, that are nurturing. One of my friends was raising his kids, he and his wife, homeschooling the kids, and his wife was friends with a number of other Christian homeschoolers. And he said to her, they had a little Facebook association, he said to her, I don't think they're as Christian as you think. I don't think they're on the same page. And she kept saying, no, they are. Well, when the Obergefell decision came down and marriage was redefined, every one of those 10, 15 friends turned their Facebook photo into gay colors. So a lot of times you have to dig deeper and find out what people really believe. I was talking to a pastor in California, executive pastor at a large church there, and this godly man raised his kids in a godly home, but he told me all of his kids now, they're adults, so either late teens, early 20s. He said every one of them differs with him on homosexuality. So he realized that they were raised by the culture even more, and that California, being as radical as it is, impacted his kids more, and that he took certain things for granted. So you can't take anything for granted. And just like everything else, our values are always contrary to the values of the world. What we want to do is instill, not this is bad, but this is good, this is right, this is wholesome. And as people walk in it and we reinforce that, and they have a real relationship with the Lord, which is the number one priority, then they'll get through just fine. We're watching it with our own grandkids coming through just fine.
So you want to instill the proper loves in your children.
Yes.
Formed by that which we love. And so establish the right liturgical practices in the home and teach the children to love that which is good and true.
And above all, make sure that they really come into a relationship with God for themselves, that they're not just going through the motions, that they're not just doing it because their parents do it. They may do that for a certain period of time, but just like the crowd with the woman at the well in Samaria, when she begins telling everybody about Jesus, and then they go here and they say, now we believe not because you told us, but because we heard for ourselves. When you look in the book of Deuteronomy, you see that every generation has to have a fresh encounter with God. So one generation dies in the wilderness. Now the next generation has to know the God of their fathers. Otherwise, they'll fall away. So those of us who know God and have experienced God need to transmit a living faith to the next generation, and then they will come out shining in the midst of it.
So I'd love to talk a little bit more about the transgender issue. So why is it not a good thing if somebody transitions from a boy to a girl or a girl to a boy?
Well, first thing, you can't. In other words, that's just our terms for it. But as far as biology, as far as DNA, you haven't transitioned at all. Now, we understand that there's a tiny, tiny percentage, well under 1%, that would identify as intersex. And I interact with someone on Facebook regularly, a rocket scientist, literally, and always very gracious. I'll actually see other sites where this person is defending me. But intersex is, I guess, born, seemed to be male, then started to develop as a female and has a chromosomal abnormality. And because this person's brilliant, they send me all the papers and all the documentation, etc., and lives with a man, but it's a platonic relationship, whatever. This individual goes by the name of Zoe, is always trying to educate me about these realities, but that pertains to this tiny, tiny, tiny percentage of intersex, where there's biological ambiguity or something like that. That's not what we're talking about in the vast, vast, vast percentage of those who identify as transgender. In other words, whatever you can check out, DNA and genetics and everything, it's telling you that this person is a male or a female. So first thing, you can't change. And if a man really believes he's a woman, no matter what he does, he will never be completely female. He'll never be able to conceive and have a child, which is the one thing that a woman can do that a man could never do. You know, one of the great distinctives, right? So the fact is, anything that you have to do to go against the natural tendency of a healthy body is bad. It's not like they have cancer and they're taking chemo with some bad side effects to fight the cancer. It's that they have a healthy body and they have healthy sexual organs and they're functioning just fine and their hormones are normal, and yet because of an emotional crisis, pain, something very deep that must be tremendously painful, tremendously agonizing to live with, I can't imagine, they feel they need to change. So the first thing is you can't change. Second thing is you're going against the natural order of what's best for your body. So that means for the rest of your life, you have to maintain a certain facade. In other words, I don't mean the person doesn't feel it genuinely, but if you go off those drugs, then you're going to start to revert. The attractive female is going to start to have her voice deepen and hair grow on her cheeks and things like that. So you're never fully that other person. And then from a faith perspective, you're saying that on a very fundamental level that God messed things up. Now here's the thing. Some people are born with a severe disability, born blind or born crippled, all right? We all recognize that as a disability. We don't celebrate that. We don't say, isn't that wonderful? We do our best to help that person lead a whole and productive life. Whereas the transgender mentality is, God has gifted me to be transgender. Well, then why are you trying to alter what he gifted you with? It's a very, very different perspective, and you cannot separate it from the larger activism, the larger LGB activism that it's appended to. It is a fundamental assault on God's order, God's nature. And you'll even have someone, okay, here's a man who's attracted to women, but he identifies as a lesbian trapped in a man's body. So the whole thing ends up just being very twisted, whereas the obvious solution is if you're in a man's body, you're attracted to women, shouldn't you get help to recognize that you're a man? So in many levels, and also the idea that there are multiple genders. There's no scientific basis for that, nor is there a biblical basis for it. So again, just based on a fundamental myth. I'm not belittling the pain that people live with or the struggles they go through. Again, I can't imagine. I have an older cousin that lost a lot by identifying as a female later in life, starting in his mid to late 60s, and cut me off in the process of our interaction. So I'm not belittling that. I'm simply saying God has a better way.
So if somebody does transition, should a Christian, out of attempting to express love, refer to that person by new pronouns? Yes or no?
No, but let me qualify this.
Okay.
If I meet someone, like I was doing an event and there was a man that showed up there wearing a long skirt, blouse with a bra, wearing a wig, and we sat down to have a meal. We were invited to get there early and interact, a lesbian pastor and some others. And I sat across from him and he said, "Hi, I'm Roberta." So his voice, I'm saying that so you understand, it was a deep voice. And Roberta proceeded to tell me that he was upset with me, had a bone to pick, because he attended a debate I did with a professing gay Christian. He said, and neither of you opened in prayer. And then when we were introducing ourselves, he identified himself as to the right of Rush Limbaugh politically and holding to the infallibility of Scripture.
Interesting.
Yeah. The only name I had for him was Roberta. So when I met him, the only polite way to interact was as Roberta. Now, if I knew him before, let's say he was Robert, and wanted to be called Roberta, I wouldn't do that as a matter of conscience. But here, just in a civil way, meeting someone, all right? But when it comes to referring to them, I will do whatever I can to avoid cooperating with what I believe is deception, delusion, or mental disorder, whatever it is, on their end. Now there is the one idea, as Ben Shapiro says, you can't change your sex, but you can change your name. So if someone says, my name is Napoleon or I'm Elvis Presley, you call them by that name. My philosophy would be, I do not want to collude with their delusion or whatever it would be. And therefore, I would not comply with that. I would politely find a way around it, or I'd tell them, sorry, but I have to refer to you in this way. Now, I could understand a Christian differing with me, saying you got to reach people where they are. But I'll give you an example of real life things that happen. One woman calls my radio show, a pastor's wife. She said, what do we do? We've got someone in our church, and I forget if it was male or female. He's been coming for years. He just came to meet with us and said, I'm actually a woman, and I can't live like this. I'm under deep conviction. What do I do? I said, best thing to do with that person is get him to drop out of public life in the church, get off the hormones, whatever they can, reverse sexually, do it, and then try to find them a new church where they can show up. You don't want, kids want, was that Joe? Is that Jane now? The confusion, and help them find a new home. Another pastor calls me, and he said, and he had asked me to speak on transgender issues at his church. And he said, remember you told us if guy comes in carrying a Bible, wearing a dress, love on that person, invite him out for lunch? I said, yeah. He goes, well, that happened. We did. He said, but then we found out during the service he used the ladies' room. What do we do? I said, when he comes next time, have your ushers looking for him. And when he comes to say, we are so glad you're here. We love that you're coming. But listen, we don't want you to be uncomfortable or the ladies to be uncomfortable. If you need to use the restroom at any point, just take in the back. You can use the pastor's lounge there. So we do our best to reach out to the person without colluding with their misperceptions about themselves.
So it's an issue of not committing false testimony.
Yeah. I mean, look at any other situation. If you are convinced that this person is not dealing with reality, again, I don't say that to demean those that are struggling, but if I'm convinced that this person who is absolutely sure that they are a movie star is not a movie star, right? Or that I'm sure you are not Paul McCartney. I am sure you are not Prince Charles. Whatever it is, that if I realize that my speaking to them is contributing to their wrong understanding or giving them the impression that I accept it, I will go out of my way to not do it. Now, look, I was on Tyra Banks years ago, and they're parading out these little kids. The youngest ever happened on television, identifying them as transgender, etc. And then I came on afterwards. So there was going to be a transgender activist, a married woman with a boy that identifies as girl, whatever it was. And then this other doctor, Marcy Bowers, so I read up to see who was going to be on the panel. And Dr. Bowers is called the rock star of sex change surgery. So Marcy Bowers is a man who had sex change surgery and now performs sex change surgery for others and was apparently a frequent guest on the Tyra show. So I knew if in that setting I clearly addressed Dr. Bowers as a he or made it clear that that's how I felt, that it would alienate the very audience I'm trying to reach out to. And they've already had this tremendous emotional setup with the kids and the parents crying. So and I'm the guy, I'm the male, right? The white male, the big guy. So there's all the obstacles against me. So I thought the simple thing is just call him Dr. Bowers, because that works. That's the last thing. So sometimes you can find a way to avoid the confrontation. But when push comes to shove, if I was asked, how do I feel about Dr. Bowers? I'd say, he's a man. I'd openly say that.
When Christians encounter the pervasive growth of this ideology, is one fitting response to become angry? And how does a Christian become angry in the right sorts of ways? How does one become angry without sinning? Yeah.
So that is in the Bible, right? Be angry and don't sin. So there is a righteous indignation. For example, when you see a drag queen dancing suggestively in front of a toddler, how can you not have righteous indignation? When you hear a 20-year-old woman getting up saying, I was tricked, I had mastectomy and radical surgery, and I made a mistake. I'm not a man, I'm a woman. And how can you not have righteous indignation over these things? But that's going to drive us to our knees in prayer. That's going to drive us to take action that's not yelling and screaming and berating people. that's going to drive us to take action where we will sacrificially give our lives to change the lives of others. So sometimes we want to be so loving and nice that we've got no conviction, we've got no backbone, we've got no courage, and we need to be driven in a righteous way. But then many other times we just get in the flesh and we get nasty and mean-spirited, and now we hurt our own cause. Here, look like this. Think of our president. We all want him to fight, but we would appreciate it if he didn't fight in such a nasty way. But you can fight and be strong and stand your ground and not be a pushover without insulting and demeaning other people in the process. So when I see on social media Christians lashing out, and they sound just like the world, their tone is just like the world, there's obviously an anger and a tremendous judgmentalism of others and almost a moral superiority, and that pushes people away and alienates. But we can take a stand. People are going to hate us either way. No matter how loving, compassionate I try to be, you're never going to be more Christ-like than Christ, and he was killed. So we understand that. It's an honor to be rejected and hated for him. But let it be for him, not because we're foolish, not because we're carnal, not because we're nasty. 1 Peter 4, if you're going to suffer, let it be for the cross, not because you're a troublemaker. So trouble will follow us if we stand for righteousness. We don't have to be troublemakers.
How do you encourage people to stand for righteousness? How would you encourage a Christian that says, I don't want to speak about these sorts of issues because I don't want to be labeled a bigot. I'm afraid to be called a bigot. And so I just want to hold these, sort of personally. How do you train up such a person?
Yeah, well, there's the New York approach, which is say, stop being a coward and grow up. But
what's the Midwestern approach?
Yeah, okay.
Somebody like myself.
Number one, I always start with telling people to pray for God's heart for those who identify as LGBT. In other words, the first thing I want is to have God's love and God's heart for them. Start there. Out of that, I can then call on people to stop being selfish and say, listen, if you really care, you have to stand, you have to act. And you ask them, how do we look back in American history at the Christians that thought slavery was wrong but weren't willing to take a stand? How do we look at the Christians in Nazi Germany, which is it's too dangerous, we better look the other way? How do we look at Christians that, I know abortion's wrong. I guess it is kind of like murdering a baby, but I don't want to rock the boat. That's what's called selfishness. That's what's called carnality. I would call that person to really repent and say, listen, it's not about you or your feelings. It's about doing the will of God. And Jesus said, not just if you love father, mother more than me, son or daughter more than me, you're not worthy of me, but if you love your own life, you can't follow me. So following Jesus means that the end of the right to govern my life and to just live this peaceful, quiet life. And now it's a life called to obedience. So I'm going to be a peacemaker. I'm going to do my best to be honorable if I'm an employee, to be hardworking and honest and all of that. But if we don't speak, if we don't shine, what use are we? Jesus said that if the salt loses its saltiness, it's going to be trampled underfoot. And you don't take the light and hide it. So we have direct commands from the Lord. And then, Dietrich Bonhoeffer said the ultimate test of a moral society is the kind of world that it leaves to its children. So appeal from that angle. If you don't speak, what kind of world your kid's going to grow up in? When they can't hold an open church service and preach from the Bible on certain passages, what are you going to tell them? When they say, Mom, Dad, what were you doing when they took our rights away? What were you doing when they were indoctrinating this next generation? What were you doing? Why is it that we can't raise our kids in the freedoms you had? Let them feel the moral weight and responsibility of the issue. And then also the question, if we don't speak the truth to the homosexual community, who will? If we don't bring the gospel, who will? We're called to warn. We're called to reach out. If we don't, then we're in direct disobedience to God.
So how do pastors and church leaders help train up congregants to be able to act in that sort of way? How do pastors and church leaders help inculcate and disciple into courage and even a willingness to be persecuted?
Yeah, so a few different questions come together here. One, you want to model everything in a way that people can emulate. So with love, with compassion, but without compromise. Again, hearts of compassion, backbones of steel. Reach out and resist. So you want to model that in your tone. Another reason, though, that many people don't speak out is they don't know what to say. And for sure, if there's an area that I have very little confidence that I can answer, and someone wants to debate me in that area versus an area that I'm fluent in, I'll take the other one. So a lot of pastors don't speak because they don't know what to say. And they got their plates full already. Now they're going to have to deal with this issue or these questions. So what you need to do is make resources available. Give basic education. Hey, we're going to have a 4-week class on thus and such. We invite everyone to come. We're going to deal with marriage, family values, why we believe what we believe. So you give people more confidence so they can kind of walk with their head up like, oh, yeah, we're not idiots, we're not fools, we have reasons for these things. That's helpful. Then get people in to testify who've come out of homosexuality, who used to identify as transgender. Let people hear that there's hope, there's transformation, and let those people say, we need you to speak up. We're all alone. Somebody's going to stand up for us. Let them feel that sense of solidarity. And then on a larger issue, the American church just needs to wake up. I've been overseas, probably about 200 trips. I've been to India 27 straight years. And I've literally washed the feet of martyrs' widows in India. Men that we've laid hands on and sent out have been killed for preaching the gospel. And they go fully knowing what could come. One of our spiritual sons in the Middle East was assassinated by Al-Qaeda terrorists a few years ago. Graduated from our ministry school. I remember when he and his wife told me we feel called to the Middle East to reach the Muslims. And there they go, and he lays down his life for it. That's reality. That's the gospel. And as we're worried about someone unfriending us on Facebook, someone else is having their head chopped off. So we need to bring in stories of the persecuted church and realities of church history and just remind people, look, almost all the apostles were killed for this faith that we hold to. You know, the English Bible you hold in your hand, the pioneers of that, they were killed for translating. You know, these are the realities. It's happening around the world. And then you teach what the scriptures say, and then it becomes kind of an honor. When you're hated for Jesus, when you're mocked for Jesus, when my team sends me the latest attack on me to encourage me that we're doing the right thing. So I want people to love me and accept me. But if they hated Jesus, he says they're going to hate you also. John 15. Matthew 10, he said, if the master of the house is called Beelzebub, you know, Satan himself, what are they going to call the servants of the household? In 2 Timothy 3, all those who live a godly life in Christ Jesus will suffer persecution. So we need to ask, where's the persecution? Where's the resistance? We don't look for trouble, but we know as followers of Jesus, shining the light in dark places, there will be opposition.
So you've talked a fair bit about how Christians can act in individual contexts. How does a Christian faithfully express what it is that the scriptures teach in the public square?
So this is where the rubber meets the road, because this is where the pushback comes. So again, you have the right heart, you have the right information. You'll find many times talking with activists, or maybe the second level down, the people who've learned from the activists, they just have their talking points. And the moment you push past them, you know, love is love. So it'd be like, okay, for like 3 women to marry, or a man of, love is love. You know, a lot of times they don't have much information. So you be the better informed. You have your arguments down. If you're going to speak up, make sure you've got your facts in order first. And then ask the Lord what setting you're supposed to take a stand in. Is it that you're supposed to blog about things? Is it that on social media you're supposed to share articles or videos from others who hold to your viewpoint? And then brace yourself for the fact that not all your friends are really your friends. Pray for open doors. Lord, am I supposed to get involved in my school? Maybe something just comes knocking at your door right after you pray about that. Whatever sphere you have, parents who have kids in school, so maybe get on the school board. Instead of just complaining about the bad school board, maybe get on the school board. Go to the parent-teacher meeting, spend the extra time to get involved. You see something happening in the business place that's unrighteous, that, Lord, am I supposed to take a stand here? And then, be it in the political realm, whatever realm we have to use that expression in an unashamed way. And not in a forced way, where we try to make it every conversation, but there'll be enough opportunities in the course of a day or a week or a month. Look for opportunities to engage. Look for opportunities to challenge other values, mindsets, ask honest questions. You know, we just had an openly gay, quote, married man running for president. Plenty of things to talk about in that setting. There are policy issues coming up all the time. States with so-called conversion therapy bans. One thing after another is in the public square, and we have many, many ways that we can address it. And the simple thing is, wherever you find yourself, that's your audience. That's your sphere. And you say, well, no, I feel like I'm supposed to address it up here. We'll start over here. Faithful in little, faithful in much. Prove yourself here, and then God will open a bigger door and give you a greater opportunity. And whatever you do, avoid situations that you will appear to be hateful, negative, aggressive, bashing. If you're going to speak about what's wrong, also speak about what's right. Also point to God having a better way. And don't be ashamed to put your views in the exact context of the gospel. You don't need to separate them. Sometimes we just make a social argument, but otherwise don't be ashamed to say, look, I'm a follower of Jesus, and the Bible's clear, and I know God has a better way. Don't be ashamed of the gospel.
Are there some examples of people or leaders that are doing that in particularly effective or good ways?
Yeah. Let me switch subjects over to abortion. I live near Charlotte, North Carolina, and there are a couple of major ministries that have worked together. Now, actually, a bunch coming together. And one businessman started to go out with some of the ministries, see what was happening, and got burdened to leave his business and give himself to fight against abortion, and started something called Love Life Charlotte. And then it's expanded to just Love Life over North Carolina, and now they're in different states. Now they're helping in New York and in Virginia and other places, and literally thousands of babies are being saved. And abortion workers are coming to faith. And moms and dads are having their baby, then having baby showers and getting care and financial help for a couple of years and things. And churches coming together. And what they've done is they've done it in a holistic way. They've involved the body of Christ to say, hey, we're going to stand and get involved together. And they get different churches each week to be in front of an abortion clinic, and they're counsel and prayer and ministry and things like that. And it's just starting to get more and more momentum, and everything about it just exudes Jesus and grace and goodness, while they take clear, unequivocal stands and show the evil of abortion and yet the goodness of God having a better answer. That's been very effective, and I see it right in the community. In California, as there was an attempt to pass, quote, conversion therapy ban for all ages. They already have it for minors, for all ages. Finally, a bunch of major churches that hadn't spoken up began to speak up and began to take stands, and now have worked together with lawyers, have worked together with psychologists and others with ex-gays. And it's a pitched battle there in California, but people have been mobilized. And for the moment, the legislation just stepped back from where it was. But part of that was just meeting with the key people involved and sitting down and talking. And they'd show up with 50 ex-gays on the steps of a congressional building and say, hey, we're here. You can't deny that we're here. So there are these different grassroots movements that are taking place that are making progress. But here's what we have to understand. I want to win, right? If I'm playing sports, for fun, you want to win. You want your team. You're rooting for a team. You want to win. But in this world, we'll never totally win until Jesus comes. In other words, there's going to be back and forth. There's going to be ups and downs. What we have to do is do what we can. Yeah, I want to see everything reversed. I don't just want to see Roe v. Wade reversed. I want to see a culture of life through the nation. I want to see it where no one's parading homosexuality because people are happily married, and those that are struggling, we're providing help for. But in this world, we're not going to see perfection. I'd like to see no one on drugs and no one drunk and no one getting raped. Okay, we understand it's a fallen world, but I know that we can make a difference. And I know as much as society shifted radically in one way in this recent generation, it can shift back. And I go back in American history in the 1720s. One pastor looking back before the Great Awakening said religion lay, as it were, dying in America. This is in the colonies. Revival scholar James Edwin Orr said 1800, Chief Justice John Marshall said the church has fallen too far to ever recover. And then my favorite, 1966, Time magazine, April, first time they had a cover without a picture. Is God dead? 5 years later, June 71, the Jesus Revolution. So things can shift, things can change. And that's what I'm looking to see, a awakening, a turning, a transformation, a pushing back, the exposing of what's wrong, rather than just capitulating and saying it's all going to come down, it's all going to get worse. And a lot of Christians say, well, Jesus is coming at any minute, it's all coming down anyway, why bother? That's what I heard when I got saved almost 50 years ago. I was 16 when I got saved. Our oldest granddaughter is 19 years old in college. It's a long time's gone by. He hasn't come back yet. So I want to act responsibly. Stand, shine the light, bring hope, bring encouragement. I want to see change come, but we're going to do what we can. We're called to be obedient and stand and then leave the results to God.
So one of the things that people sometimes say to Christians that are operating on the public square is that faith shouldn't be political, though. Your faith shouldn't be political. Is that true?
Well, if you mean your faith should not be partisan political so that you identify your whole faith with being a Republican or being a Democrat, then I would agree that we are not partisan in our political affiliation based on faith, as if being a follower of Jesus means I am therefore a card-carrying Republican or Democrat or member of the NRA for that matter. But does politics intersect with other areas of life? Does it intersect with life and death issues? Does it intersect with laws about righteousness? Did it intersect with slavery? Does it intersect with abortion? Does it intersect with definitions of marriage? Does it intersect with religious liberties? Yes. So the better question is, how could you have faith that's not political? How could you have faith that is totally apolitical, so there's no involvement? Again, our primary mission is not on the political sphere, but the gospel intersects with politics. And here, the Great Commission is to go and make disciples. So how does a disciple live? Does a disciple not get involved? Does a disciple not have a family? Does a disciple not work a job? Does a disciple not cast a vote? So I understand that often the church becomes an appendage of a political party. And it seems like we'll do anything to get a seat at the table. And that's compromised and that's hypocritical. In that sense, we should be like a heavenly third party, God's prophetic party, and people have to come to us, and then we vote accordingly. It may be for one party, it may be for another, etc. But the idea that faith is apolitical, that it has no intersection with politics, that means it has no intersection with life in this world, which is simply not true, especially in a democratic republic like America.
So how can we identify evil without being carnal or fleshly, and what kinds of communication can we use when confronting it or addressing it?
Right. So is it right to be at a gay pride event, holding up signs and shouting homosexuality is an abomination? Is that a right thing to do because it's a scriptural statement that homosexual practice is detestable in God's sight? Do we just speak so politely that no one knows what we're saying? So number one, let's be clear. I've heard Christian leaders make statements. I have no idea what they believe. I'm a follower of Jesus. I know the lingo. It's like, I have no idea where you stand on this. So let's be clear so there can be no misunderstanding. Let's be sure that there is not hatred, animosity in our hearts, that we really care about that person, want to see what's best for them. And then there are things that are child abuse, and I'll say it's child abuse. If I can find a professional in the field that says it, all the better, right? So I asked Dr. Paul McHugh before I was on Tyra Banks years ago about his views on transgender issues and sex change surgery. Had they changed it all? And he wrote to me and said that any chemical altering, biological altering of a child growing up, he said that's child abuse. So I'll quote Dr. McHugh in saying that because it is that. It should not be done. I don't care how much the person thinks they're doing what's right. If there is this drag queen in underwear twerking in front of a 3-year-old girl, I'll say that's perverse and that's child abuse. I won't get into all kinds of name calling about the person and just starting to insult, but I'll identify sin and evil for what it is as forcefully as I can. But we just have to realize is, though, that flesh can't drive out flesh. Satan doesn't drive out Satan. We need the Holy Spirit, the Martin Luther King adage that darkness doesn't drive out darkness, light drives out darkness. So whatever I do, I'm not going to descend into someone else's level of carnality. And look, I'm from New York, sarcasm runs in my veins, just putting each other down and debating back and forth. It's just kind of a way of life. And I'm a debater. So my first thing, if I'm confronted, my first thing is to hit right back and expose. And sometimes that's the right thing to do. And sometimes the better thing to do is ask a disarming question. Proverbs 15:1, a harsh word stirs up strife, right? But a soft answer turns away wrath, or Proverbs 25:15, that a soft answer breaks the bone. So we want to be strategic. We want to be Spirit-led. So there's a time when we shout from the rooftops, this is wrong. You can hate me. You can despise me. So be it. I already accept the fact that the world looks at me a certain way. Look, I'm a Jewish follower of Jesus. So to a religious Jew, I'm an apostate. I'm the worst of apostates because I'm a missionary. So I wear that. I accept that. I understand that. It's my honor to be maligned for the cause of the gospel. So I understand, no matter what I say or how I say it, that the activists, others, they're going to look at me as a homophobe and a transphobe and put me on all their hit lists and hate lists. So be it. That's a badge of honor. And I will speak the truth without wavering. But I want every sentence that I say in every context, be it a radio show, be it a sermon, be it an article, be it a book, I want every sentence to be quotable. In context, whatever I say, I want to be able to stand by every word. So I don't want to get caught up in the emotion, right? We understand James 1 that the anger of man does not accomplish God's righteous will. So I don't want to get caught up in the emotion. I want to have God's heart. And if God's heart is rebuke, I want to rebuke. If God's heart is to warn, I want to warn. If God's heart is to shout it from the rooftops and that's the last message I ever give, so be it. Let it be clear and let it be something that I can stand by years later. The thing is, many times in the heat of interaction, especially social media, we don't process things. How many of us have written emails and held on to it until the next day in the midst of like an interpersonal conflict and looked at it, it's like, I can't believe I wrote that. I remember in the midst of a split and a conflict with a close friend years ago, I blind copied my wife, Nancy, on the email, and she said, yeah, thanks for sending that. We got to talk before you send it out. I said, I did send it out. When we looked, it's like, what was I thinking? So don't get caught up in the heat of the moment. Step back, get your thoughts together, and then speak as a representative of the Lord. And let the arrow shoot straight and clear. Let it be dipped in love, but sometimes love is going to rebuke. Sometimes love is going to pierce. We don't have to name call. We don't have to demean human beings as human beings, but we can call them plainly what God does and call them higher.
Well, I really appreciate you taking the time. It's been great speaking with you.
My joy.
And thanks for serving the Lord.
My joy to do it.